This module is a part of the training series for the POWER program, Positive Outcomes with Emotional Regulation. This module in the series is intended as an overview of POWER implementation. It includes key information about running a POWER program group. Please take a few moments to review this disclaimer about this training module. As mentioned in the introduction module, the POWER program is a 7-week cognitive behavioral group intervention for students in grades 7 through 12. Each group meeting is approximately 35 to 45 minutes long, with the intention that it can be completed in one class period. The POWER program is intended for students with or at risk for mental or behavioral health needs, including both internalizing and externalizing needs. This program is different from many group-based interventions for schools in that it can be implemented by any school-based professional and does not need to be implemented by someone with specific training in mental health. Briefly, we will discuss the materials that are needed to run a POWER program group. There are 4 materials needed to run the POWER program. These include the implementation manual, student book, challenge book, and handouts for teachers and parents. Let's start with the implementation manual. The implementation manual is intended for use by the program implementer. It includes an overview of the POWER program and some implementation tips. Then it contains detailed information about running each group meeting. In the implementation manual, you will find scripting for each group meeting and key information you will need to run the group. The implementer will need to bring the implementation manual to each group meeting to refer to throughout. The next material is the student book. You will need 1 student book for each student, as well as an additional student book as the implementer to refer to during each group meeting. The student book is used in each group meeting for activities and self-reflection. It contains worksheets, reflection prompts, and visuals to support group meeting activities. Each student is assigned their own student book to use during all group meetings. At the beginning of each meeting, you will hand out the student books and collect them at the end of the meeting. The reason for this is that we want to ensure that each student has the student book with them at each group meeting, and they do not forget or lose it. At the end of the POWER program, you will make a copy of the student's books and return the original to the student, so they have a copy to refer to after the group has ended. The next key material is the challenge book. Every group meeting includes a challenge at the end for students to complete over the course of the week. These challenges are very important because they encourage students to practice their POWER program skills in the real world. It is not enough for students to be able to show skills in group meetings alone. It is important that these skills generalize to the student's actual environment, such as the classroom, home, and community. All the challenge assignments are included in the challenge book. For every group meeting, there is 1 handout or form available in this resource that is intended to be given to students at the end of each group meeting. Each student does not get their own challenge book. Instead, you are to print copies of the challenge form and hand them out at the end of each session. The final material component of the POWER program is the adult handout. This resource is intended to be shared with important adults in the lives of students participating in the POWER program. People like parents, guardians, and caregivers, teachers, and other school-based professionals like related service providers. This resource shares general information about the POWER program in meeting sequence and ways that adults can support students in developing and applying new skills throughout the POWER program. It's a helpful overview sheet to learn more about the program. In this next section, we will discuss how each group meeting is structured and the core components of each group meeting. There are 7 core group meetings in the POWER program. They are Introduction to the POWER program, Recognizing and labeling emotions, Relaxation and behavioral activation, Understanding and observing thoughts, Catch, Check, Choose, which is covered during group meetings 5 and 6, and Planning for Success. There is also an optional group booster meeting and an optional individual booster meeting. At the beginning of every group meeting, the implementation manual includes a group meeting at a glance overview for the implementer. In the group meeting at a glance, there are objectives listed so you can quickly recall the purpose of each group meeting and what students are supposed to learn and/or do that day. In the next section, there are a list of materials you will need to run the group. In the left-hand column, there's a list of materials you will need for each student. For example, you will always need a student book, writing utensil, and challenge form for each student for every group meeting. There may be other materials for each student that are specific to the group meeting as well, and they will be listed here. In the right-hand column, there is a list of materials for the group as a whole. For example, you will always need the agenda for that group meeting and the group expectations poster displayed for every group meeting. There are other materials you may also need to run the group listed here. Finally, in the session at a glance, you will see the agenda for the meeting. There is an overview for the core components of the group meeting. The approximate times of each section of the agenda are also listed to help you with planning. When students begin to arrive to your group meeting, greet them as they enter and provide them with their student book and a writing utensil. At the beginning of group meetings 3 through 7 and during meeting 2, you will prompt students to complete their self-monitoring form, shown here and on page 3 of the student book. During group meeting 2, students will identify their emotion goal, that is what emotion they want to decrease, and what emotion they want to increase. At each group meeting 2 through 6, students will rate how much of the week they felt those 2 emotions. This is helpful for students to reflect on their goals in preparation for your group meeting. It is also data you can use to see if the group is effective for students. More on this later in this module. At the beginning of most group meetings, you will review the expectations you developed in group meeting 1. It is recommended that you call on one student to lead this review. For every session, you will display the agenda for the group. This can be done by writing it on a poster or whiteboard, or projecting it on a smartboard. It does not matter the format of the agenda, just that everyone will be able to see it. You do not have to include the times on your agenda. Briefly walk through the agenda at the beginning of each group meeting. In all group meetings except the first one, you will review the challenge from the previous week. Each group meeting plan includes brief scripting to review the content of the previous week's group. It then prompts you to review the challenge from that week. For every group meeting, you will complete the challenge form as well, and then share it with the students. We encourage you to share your challenge first to model the review of the assignment. After you have shared your challenge, you will call on students to share theirs. If students have not completed the challenge form, prompt them to reply verbally. If a student cannot think of an answer when called on, move on to another student and come back to them later. Encourage everyone to participate. In most group meetings, you will lead students in a guided practice of relaxation strategies. This program uses 3 different relaxation strategies in group meetings, including guided imagery, deep breathing, and muscle relaxation. There's a detailed scripting in the implementation manual to help you lead these guided practices. Every group meeting introduces new content, including materials and skills. When teaching a new concept, the POWER program uses an I do, we do, you do model. This means first you will introduce the new content and demonstrate how it looks. Then you will lead the students in a guided practice where you work through the concept or skill together. And finally, you will ask students to complete a page in the student book to either practice the skills independently or reflect on it. There is explicit scripting and directions in the implementation manual to walk you through the I do, we do, you do model. It is designed after teaching academic instruction and similar to what students are exposed to in the classroom. So this should be a familiar format for them. At the end of each group meeting, you will collect the student books so you have them for next time. You will go over the challenge for the week and do a brief summary of the group meeting. Then, before students leave, you will pass out the challenge forms. Again, all of this information is included and scripted in the implementation manual. Now that we have discussed the core components of the POWER program, here are some tips for enrollment, implementation, and evaluation. There are 4 technical assistant components intended to support you in implementing the POWER program. The first you have already found, these training modules. There are several training modules for you to watch. There is an introduction to the POWER program that is intended to be watched by anyone who wants more information about the program. This module, Introduction to Implementation, is an overview for the program implementers. There is 1 module each for each group meeting 1 through 7, and another module each for the optional booster group meeting and booster individual meeting. Finally, there is a module for data-based decision-making for the team at the school who is charged with monitoring Tier 2 interventions. When you watch the modules for each group meeting, it is recommended that you have the implementation manual and a copy of the student book available while you watch for reference. Prior to starting a group, watch each of these modules first to familiarize yourself with the content of the POWER program as a whole. Prior to each group meeting, you may want to watch the modules for that specific group meeting. As a refresher, these modules were designed to be relatively brief for this purpose. Another technical assistance component is the Data-Based Decision-Making Guide. There is a summary of data-based decision-making in the implementation manual, as well as an additional guide with more details that can be utilized by a team. When you are forming a POWER group, you will want to identify appropriate students who can benefit from the group. Students who show difficulties with regulating emotions, whether this is internalizing or externalizing mental health concerns, are appropriate for group. In addition, students with challenging life experiences that place them at risk for mental health needs are also appropriate for the POWER program. While this program was developed to be used for students at risk for a variety of mental health concerns, it is not appropriate for all students. Due to a strong cognitive component of this program, it is not intended for students with severe intellectual or developmental disabilities. It is also not intended for students in need of individualized supports, such as those with severe depression or anxiety. or those with violent and extremely aggressive behaviors. The Database Decision-Making Guide includes recommended resources for identification, including universal screenings and referrals. All mental and behavioral health intervention programs must be evaluated for their effectiveness. This can be done through progress monitoring and outcome evaluations. As mentioned earlier, each session includes a progress monitoring component where students rate their emotion goals for the week. The Database Decision-Making Guide also includes information about additional progress monitoring methods that can be used. It is recommended at the outset and conclusion of the program an outcome evaluation be used. Again, the Database Decision-Making Guide provides some examples of measures that schools may utilize for this program. The purpose of progress monitoring and outcome evaluation is to determine whether students have adequately responded to the program and what are the next steps for that student. The implementation guide also contains some tips for Power Program implementation, in addition to detailed scripts for each group meeting. Before you start a new Power Program group, work with teachers to identify a good time to hold group meetings. Ensure students are not consistently missing critical instructional periods or preferred periods in the day. You will also want to reserve a private, quiet place to hold your group meetings. This might be in an empty classroom, a school office, or a quiet area of the library or cafeteria. You will want this location to be private to help students feel comfortable talking about their feelings. You will also want this location to be quiet and free of distractions, so students can focus on instruction, discussions, and practice opportunities. Prior to each group meeting, communicate to students and staff when and where your group meetings will occur. Consider providing hall passes to students to remind them of the group meeting schedule. Arrange your group meeting environment for success by ensuring you have a desk or table space and seat for each student in your group, arranged in a U shape, with students facing in toward the middle of the U. This arrangement will facilitate group discussions and allow you to actively supervise students throughout your group meeting. Even if you already know the names of all your students in your group, using name tents can be helpful in two ways. First, students in your group might not know all the other participating students. Second, using tent names is an easy way to assign seats and communicate about seat assignments. Use the Group Meeting at a Glance list of group meeting materials to get all materials and enough materials for all students. Ready to go before you starting your group meeting. As discussed earlier, to help yourself stay on track and help your students understand what each group meeting will entail, you will post the group meeting agenda in a public location. You will refer back to the group meeting agenda as you transition between activities. The final technical assistant component are adherence checklists. The POWER program incorporates various empirically supported techniques that are strategically grouped and sequenced to promote student outcomes. When these techniques are not implemented or implemented as intended, the POWER program may be less effective or not effective at all. The POWER program adherence checklist can be used to monitor and evaluate intervention implementation. These checklists can be completed by POWER program group meeting facilitators as a self-assessment tool or by other school-based professionals as an observation tool. That takes us to the end of our module. You should now be able to describe the POWER program materials and core components. You should also be able to list the tips for enrollment, implementation, and evaluation. If you have further questions, please consult the POWER Program Implementation Manual. You should now plan to watch the module for the Group 1 meeting. This resource was developed by the Devereaux Center for Effective Schools and has been made available to you through the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration and the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center.